What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Dynasty Dumbies, your home for the latest and greatest in college football news and action. We're your hosts, Hunter and Blitz. And to start off, we're going to go straight into some more transfer portal storylines because that is the cream of the crop right now. Starting off with some big moves here with a lot of North Texas players going ahead and following their coach over to Oklahoma State like we kind of anticipated, with Drew Mestemaker going, Miles Coleman and Caleb Hawkins, as well as 5 others transferring over. And I think that just explains what's going on in the portal nowadays, where coaches go to these bigger schools and their players just follow them.
I saw it firsthand with JMU and Indiana, so not a surprise there's a whole flock of North Texas Mean Green men going that way. Do want to say I was wrong. I didn't know if Drew Messmaker was actually going to end up there, but he does follow his coach, which I think is a smart decision. But he's going. Miles Coleman, their star wide receiver, and their star running back, Caleb Hawkins, and 5 others have all officially committed to OSU. So I guess OSU's got the money like that to get all these guys. I'm always interested in knowing what these kind of deals, which is so weird to say with college football, end up looking like.
It's very weird to just think of, deals and all this stuff. It's like free agency now. But a couple more moves we got here. Some big name quarterbacks, obviously, is the thing everyone wants to go after. Is Colton Joseph, the ODU standout this year, is going to Wisconsin. Brendan Sorsby, like I had predicted, is heading to Texas Tech. And Austin Simmons, Ole Miss quarterback who was the starter before Chambliss took over when he had gotten hurt, is going to Mizzou.
I think these landing spots are good, more of a mixed bag, I think. I'm not sure about Colton Joseph to Wisconsin. I don't really know what's cooking up there. Obviously, if they offered him a big deal, then I understand it. But I would have thought maybe, I mean, he was just a tremendous playmaker. And he's going to a Big Ten school, so Wisconsin has had some down years, so I'm kind of talking myself back into, this isn't a bad landing spot for him, and maybe Wisconsin can turn it around with him under center. Sorsby to Texas Tech, I'm not surprised either. You did predict this one. I think that's a good spot for him. He's a guy who can really sling it. He's mobile. I think he'll fit well into that Red Raider offense of being able to have a fast pace of play. And Simmons will get a shot at Mizzou after losing that job at Ole Miss.
It's going to be really fun to watch. I mean, this just seeing these big names just go places and potentially, make their final claim that they can to, solidify themselves as good players, potentially build up some draft stock and whatnot. It'll be fun to watch. But another name on the move here is Parker Livingston, the receiver from Texas, and switches sides to from the rivalry and goes over to Oklahoma, which to me is criminal, absolutely criminal, but just shows the state that college football is in right now.
Going to the other side of the Red River rivalry is a crazy move. Maybe not unheard of, but it definitely is so crazy to see. I don't know if it's criminal. I think it's just nature of the beast. You saw that back in the day, but it is one of those, really makes you think when you see that one come up of what's going on. That is, I'm sure when he sees his old teammates, they'll have a good time with it, but it'll be awkward for sure, him going to Oklahoma now. But on the other hand, and I apologize if I mispronounce this, but Mateen Iruba is heading from Wake Forest to Texas Tech. He was rated by some people as the 5th best prospect, defensive tackle, huge contributor to go along with Sorsby. I think he's just as big of an ad as Sorsby to be the anchor of that defensive line.
It's always, the quarterbacks and receivers run your skill positions are always going to get the limelight, but it's those little, factors that you find in the trenches, the edge rushers, your tackles, your nose tackles. The defensive players are very key, and I think this is a massive get for Texas Tech, and, a defense that was extremely good this season, but we'll dive into that a little later, obviously, with their previous game, but still a fantastic defense throughout this season, and I think they're just only going to get better from here. But another big name that we had mentioned before is Cam Cook, is taking his talents to good old West Virginia.
That's a huge get for the Mountaineers, and the pipeline makes sense going from Jack State to WVU. Rich Rod was there the year before. He probably helped recruit him. He has that relationship. Cam Cook has this incredible breakout season, and now he's going to get the chance to move up to the Big 12 in West Virginia. And he's the type of player that Rich Rod loves. He is going to be phenomenal in that Rich Rod zone read scheme. So that's a huge get for him. Just like it's a huge get for Indiana locking up Josh Hoover, the TCU standout at quarterback. He was someone that early on, we kind of had a Heisman hopeful watch eye out on. TCU didn't have the season they had hoped for, but he had a really incredible individual season for the Horned Frogs. And it's a great get by Indiana and Signetti to get another transfer in that can lead them to success next year.
Indiana is just reloading at the quarterback position. They just seem to hit on all fronts right now. This is a massive get for them where they, don't have to worry about it pretty much. You've got your guy, for the next season, and, they can just keep building upon that and just continue this dominance that we are seeing this season. They're going to be a scary team from here on out with the way things are going and the way Signetti's got that machine running right now. So Indiana is just always going to be a team to watch from here on out, and I'm really looking forward to it because I'm ready
100%.
for a change in the power over in college football.
Yeah, some fresh blood is great, and with all these moves in college football, the transfer portal has just become the center of it all, and there's now over 4,500 players in the portal. That makes up about 31.5% of all of collegiate football athletes, and kind of raises the question of, is this a big issue moving forward that teams and players are going to be relying so much on the portal, or is this just one of those nature of the beast things where in the current era of college football, this is the reality and it's the new norm?
I'm definitely leaning on this is turning into an issue. I think that this is something that is preventable with a simple rule change where you could even just go back to how the transfer rules were before, where you get the one free transfer. You get, if you transfer again, you got to sit out for the year, and then you add a stipulation of if there's a coaching change, you can have a free transfer after that. But other than that, it's basically one free one. That's it. You had to sit out, all that kind of stuff. That really helped, teams develop. It helped these players develop. They're under the same system for the most part, barring the coaching change and stuff like that. And it just seems like now, you get a lot of these players where, you're seeing some of these graphics of players of the previous schools they played out and the one they're going to, and there's 4 schools behind that they've came from, and they're going to their 5th. And, I saw one about quarterback TJ Finley, I believe. He's moving on to, I think, his 6th school.
Might be a 7th.
6th or 7th. I don't remember, but it's ridiculous. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, he was at Tulane this previous year, but didn't see him at all because he got into, I think, legal trouble. So it was like, I think he wasn't even part of the team at all. But, like, it's just insane that we're getting to this point where, you got these players announcing, I'm signing here purely as like not a signing for like how it was in the old days, a signing of like, I'm signing a contract here and I'm only here it's only for this year. Like you're never going to see a quote unquote multi-year deal because it's just not feasible in college football. And
it's so frustrating to see unfold. I don't know if the transfer portal to me is the issue itself as opposed to just the current state of how paying players works, and it's just a byproduct of it. But the transfer portal is part of that kind of larger issue. And I agree with you. I think you should have the ability to transfer it freely. You shouldn't just have to be a graduate to immediately transfer. But it really should be limited till that one time. If you want to transfer again, you have to sit out. I think that's a good idea. And if there's a coaching change, you should get an opportunity to move on as well. So I think there should just be more stipulations in it. But that bigger issue is just NIL stands for name, image, and likeness, and how it's used is not collegiate players using their name to really get their own deals, so to speak. It's more turned into just boosters paying kids directly. And now with a lot of this new verbiage and how they'll be handling uh, transfer fees and NIL funds, recently it was proposed that schools will be able to negotiate endorsement deals directly. So, Ashton Genty last year, for example, Boise State could have negotiated a deal with Nike for him, and it wouldn't have affected the allotment of NIL they're allowed to have because it would be an outside deal. It just creates more flexibility for smaller schools, but also allows you to just add more money to it. It's just an issue with how the whole system is currently structured, with how players are getting paid, and there's no real commitment. It's just, okay, I get paid no matter what happens. So the whole state of the sport is a little bit messy.
And I think it's just trending in this direction of, chaos and just a mess. And there seems to be, no sort of hard rule set. Like, yeah, there might be rules, but there almost feels like there's gray area with them where you could possibly find loopholes and, find your way around it, where now you're seeing, these players that are suing the NCAA to try to get more years of eligibility and all this kind of stuff because they know that that's where the money's at right now. I mean, a lot of these players, if not majority of these players, will never touch the field again when they are done. And so they're going to try and take advantage of what they can, and I don't blame them because I would too if I was in that position.
And yeah, for the record, I hope that the kids, the athletes, do take advantage of that because they should if they're going to get paid this kind of money. It is not their fault; it's the system's fault. They should go after the bag 100%.
Absolutely. I mean, I would do the same exact thing if I was in their position, and I would try to get as much money as I could before it's over by the time I see it. So it's like, I don't blame them whatsoever. It's just a product of the system right now, like you had said. So there's going to be a lot of changes, and we'll have to see, if and when those changes happen, and what changes there are. If they implement a salary cap or limitations
Revenue
to
sharing,
the rev share and everything, and limitations to what these teams can and can't spend and how they're spending it and all this, and it's a whole thing that's going to take years to probably figure out, and it's never going to be perfect. Just the way that this has all fallen upon the sport, it's never ever going to be perfect for everyone. Someone's going to find something to complain about, aka Notre Dame, and just do what they can to make things easier for themselves and possibly harder for their rivals and whatnot. But it's something we're going to have to figure out, just like the SEC is going to have to figure out what is going on this bowl season for them, because they're not doing so good for the quote-unquote best conference in college football, where they're just miles above everybody else. So it's been very interesting to see these SEC talking heads come up with massive excuses for them.
I mean, the SEC is 4-9 in bowl games, and that includes 2 games against each other. So 2-7 in bowl games outside of games against interconference rivalries, and it's really hysterical to see people like Paul Feinbaum and Cam Newton being on ESPN and just saying essentially saying that it doesn't matter if the SEC isn't the best because those are the teams they're going to watch. They're essentially just admitting that they aren't really fans of football as a whole, but just the brand enthusiasts. Because Cam Newton saying he'd rather watch Arkansas over Indiana. Come on, man. Like, come on. That's such bullshit. That's not true. You do not want to watch Arkansas. And saying that you do just because they're in the SEC is exactly why people are so sick and tired of people just going up to bat for them and not even understanding what it is, just reading the scripts and really just admitting they care about the TV rankings, because TV rankings shouldn't be what determines anything in how a sport is structured. It honestly is rewarding to hear people like those two make excuses. And I want to give a shout out to Ryan Clark. He's an SEC guy, but he didn't make any excuses for him. He actually was starting to say, guys, maybe this isn't quite the way it is.
And now that, and he had even said, like, playing field's even now. So we're seeing how, I guess the SEC kind of took advantage of it beforehand, and that's what really has helped them establish that
Oh, we
dominance.
all know they
Yeah,
will.
we all know it. I mean, Ed Orgeron said it himself. He's like, if he were to come back coaching, it'd be a lot easier because before he had to take the money through the back door. Now he can take it through the front door. So it's like you're seeing the very obvious parity that it is now, and it's like you said, it's almost rewarding to see these people like Feinbaum and Cam Newton say the quiet part out loud and say that they quite literally don't care about the other conferences, teams, whatever it is, because they don't have the three letters that they like on their jersey and stuff. So it's really people are really starting to show their colors now, and especially during that Alabama game this past week, which we'll talk about later, of course, where all those SEC talking heads were dead quiet. And I kept looking. I looked for Paul Feinbaum to say something. I was looking for Joel Klatt to say something. I was looking for Kirk Herbstreit to say something. And there was crickets. They didn't really say anything. They did not, say hats off to Indiana, all this kind of stuff. It was nothing until later in the week when they were bringing it up in all those talk shows and coming up with their excuses. So we're getting to this point now where it's like, okay, we're starting to see what you're really for here. And it's very obviously you're for the conference that your boss is paying for, so that you can bring in more money for them and more money for yourself. And that's what it is at the end of the day, it feels like, for ESPN and the SEC specifically, where you get all these talking heads for it, and it's really just to drive the conversation, get the clicks, get the bait, all that kind of stuff, get people talking so that it lines their pockets with more money.
Exactly. And you like you mentioned, you watch Alabama get absolutely smothered by Indiana 38-3, and all the same people who are out here calling for heads because JMU and Tulane got in and they said that they were going to get blown out, and our two teams did lose by a lot, but both teams looked more competent than Alabama. It just goes to prove how they don't care about the actual game. They just care about the brand that they want to see there. Because if you'd put Alabama in one of those games and had them looked like JMU did against Oregon, they would have been, crickets about that too. But because it's the smaller schools in those games, that's when it's the issue. But when Alabama looks deader than a doornail against Indiana, it's just an off game, or they just didn't have the team this year. It's the excuses. So that's why it's so rewarding to see and be expected to see just the quietness from them of really not being sure how to respond to the narrative that they've created not actually coming to fruition, because they were banking on the SEC dominating and them just being able to go, see, this is what we've been saying, but they can't do that now. The empirical evidence is against them.
It's not looking good for the SEC to finish off this season, and I'm all for it. We're all for it. Seeing them kind of collapse in on themselves at the end of this year when you had their commissioner or whatever saying that they deserve 7 teams in the playoff really just shows a lot. So it's great to see how this is all kind of unfolding in these last couple weeks of the season here, that the SEC is 100% not what it used to be. And, barring, you got a couple good teams in there that we all know about. Georgia's always going to be good. Ole Miss is amazingly good this year, and stuff like that. You're going to have those good teams, but to sit here and say that top-down dominance is always going to be there is just absolute horseshit, and is growing more evidently than ever that barring your top 3-4 teams, you're not what you used to be, and everyone else has caught up. So I love to see it. We all love to see it.
Yeah, we've said this before. The SEC was riding the coattails of Nick Saban for all these years. Just because Alabama was really freaking good for so long, the rest of the SEC all thought that they were at some different caliber. But in reality, they just had one dynasty-level team in their conference for, 20 years. And they've all ridden the coattails. And there's been some other really good programs within the SEC over that time. LSU, Georgia, they've all had success. Auburn's won a natty. But to say that everyone in the conference is just on a different tier. That Mississippi State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mizzou are all these just premier teams, is we all know is fabricated, and it's because of the success of Nick Saban. So in that, the SEC was rewarded for having a team like that in its ranks for so long.
But don't forget, that gutsy fourth down call is really what put them over edge and gave them that playoff spot that they absolutely deserved. No, it absolutely wasn't. It was
Don't
fucking...
forget it.
It was horseshit. It was absolute horseshit. I mean, a gutsy fourth down call rewarding a team, basically, and all this. We're seeing the true colors here, and we're seeing what they didn't want us to see. And, there's plenty of controversy when it comes to G5 and our teams getting in, but as soon as it happens to another team, it's it wasn't supposed to happen, so it's okay, and all this other bullshit excuse. But we'll see about it. We're gonna see a lot of changes more than likely in the coming season, let alone years of SEC dominance, playoff format, all this other stuff. So we'll have to, again, just kind of kick back and wait and see the fate of our beloved teams and what will happen. But going into some of the playoff games that happened this past week, obviously starting off with one of the most important, if not the most important one, is, of course, the FCS title game that we previewed, which was a banger of a game with Montana State getting it done, taking down Illinois State in a nail-biter 35-34 in overtime. What a way to end the season for the FCS.
I mean, I had to get more sitted up for this, just because of how exciting it was. This game had it all from start to finish. Montana State built a pretty sizable lead, was leading by 2 touchdowns going into the fourth quarter. Illinois State climbs back, ties the game. They get the ball back. They get within the 37-yard field goal. And there's less than a minute left. They're going to go kick the go-ahead field goal, win their first national championship. Boom! Kick is blocked. Oh, it's stuff that you only see in movies. In Illinois State and the Bobcats went into overtime. Illinois State scores first. All they got to do is kick the extra point. They're up 7, and it's blocked again. So now Montana State just has to score and get the extra point on 4th and 10. Cover 0 blitz in their face. Their quarterback, Sampson, delivers the ball to Rico Dow in the end zone to get that win, and they walk it off with the extra point. This was the game of the year, and I'm so glad that they finally put the FCS National Championship game in a primetime spot on Monday to get the atmosphere it deserved.
It was an absolute banger of a game. Got to go rewind a little bit to the fourth quarter there. After the blocked kick, Montana State recovered the kick, returned it for a decent amount of yards, got them in good position to kick a game-winning field goal, and they get a couple of good first plays there to get them closer to that range. And right when they're about to get in the range, they take a sack, and it's like, okay, they put him back a couple yards. They still got some time. But then on third down, they take a horrible snap. Ball goes back another 10, 15 yards. It's 4th and 22 at this point, and we're about to. It's like, oh my God, what is going on here? Everything that could go wrong went wrong for them, and they had to end up punting the ball. Illinois State does nothing. It goes into overtime, and then, like you had said, just more chaos ensues with Illinois State making it look super easy, scoring in overtime there, where it was just almost like bang bang, they're in the end zone. It's like, oh my God, that happened really quick, and so it's like, all right, let's see what the defense can do, because Illinois State defense was insane in that fourth quarter. They were just absolutely locking down Montana State, and I don't know what it was, but it just clicked for them where they were like, oh, like we should not let them score. And they were doing that very well. And
they were in Justin Lamson's face the whole time. He couldn't get a clean ball off. And on top of that, they held Montana State to under 100 rushing yards in regulation, which is insanely impressive.
Absolutely. And just the way it was going down in overtime, and it, like you said, got to 4th down, and it was like, this is the game right here. The way Illinois State's, defense was playing on that drive there was like, oh, this is going to be over. Like, they have to get it in here. Or, I mean, they could have gotten a first down, but still, it was just like, oh my God, like, this is insane. And then somehow, some way, just an absolute dime to the boy Taco. Got to give a shout out to him. He's looking for an NIL deal with Taco Bell right now, and I hope he absolutely gets it because he deserves it.
He should.
He had a fantastic game, 8 catches.
Born and raised in Montana.
Yes. 8 catches,
Hometown
111
guy.
yards, game-winning touchdown. I mean, it could not be better for him. What a way to just finish it off. And it's almost funny that it came down to an extra point as like how great of a game is that where it's like you have to Illinois State has to send the brick house and everything at them to block this kick, and they couldn't get it off. Kick the extra point, win the game, win a natty. I mean, it was just phenomenal.
And on the other hand, for the Redbirds at Illinois State, what an incredible run they had, and my heart goes out to you because that is a bitter way to lose your season in the natty. They're still without a national championship, but shout out to Tommy Rittenhouse, who just went absolutely nuclear for them. 33 for 46, 311 yards and 4 touchdowns. He left it all out there for his team, and that whole Illinois State team really did. So credit where credit is due, and thank you for these teams of just putting on an awesome show in Nashville, which the FCS needs to make sure this national championship game stays at destination locations, and they should not be going back to Frisco because this game proved it. That was one of the best FCS championship atmospheres I have ever seen. If JMU had been to Nashville for any of their FCS title appearances, that would have been so much better than Frisco. So I think they need to learn and keep those games in these premier cities, and ESPN should learn that this game should stay at a Monday primetime slot to get as many eyes on it as they can, because a lot of people were talking about this game.
And rightly so. I mean, it was one of the best, purest forms of football we have seen in a while, where it was just hard-nosed. It had just about everything you wanted in it. And I hope that a lot of people watched it and realized that, there's different, the levels might be different, but at the same time, it's the same game. And they're all doing as much as they can to win. And it's just always fun to watch. And, their games are always highly entertaining. And I really just hope that, the FCS as a whole gained a lot of fans there, and people will realize that, that is still an amazing level of football being played there. And it's, they need to get the attention as well. And like you said, putting this in that primetime slot in a premier location, I think only helped it drastically. So I think they're probably going to do a lot better from here on out, because they probably see the result and the reaction that is coming from this game. So I'm sure the execs there will like it and smile upon it, because it was fantastic. But another sort of fantastic thing here is, of course, the other playoff games that are, I guess just as important as the FCS title game. But starting off with the first one, in the Cotton Bowl is, of course, the Miami downing the Hitler in Ohio State, 24-14. What a fantastic game this was.
This was an electric Friday game where that pick six by Keontae Scott just completely flipped that whole game. Miami had really been controlling everything, but Ohio State was driving, have a big play, and looks like they're going to tie this game up. And I have never seen a screen pass get read and jump so perfectly. He was standing there waiting for the ball before Julian Sayin had even wound up, and he was off to the races, 72 yards. Michael Irvin going feral on the sidelines. It was a thing of beauty.
It was awesome. I mean, Miami, kind of looked super comfortable on both sides of the ball. Of course, again, dominating the trenches there. Ruben Bain having a phenomenal game yet again. I mean, it was about as good as it could have gone for Miami on all sides of the ball. They didn't need Carson Beck to play hero ball because they were playing from ahead. They didn't need Malachi Tony to just do some ridiculous play to get him in the end zone and whatnot. No, they figured it out. They got ahead early. They held on to it. They got the stops when they needed to get the stops and just looked like a championship caliber team in that game. And it all also falls back on Ohio State looked sluggish. They looked slow. They did not look like they were interested in that first half of the game where they put up 0 points. I mean, it was not great for Ohio State in that first half, and then the second half they kind of get going there. But by the time things were slightly clicking into gear, it was almost too little, too late. Where it looked like they had a chance, and then they just couldn't get stops when they needed to. And even when they did get stops, the offense would get stopped, so they would have to give the ball right back to Miami. So it just looked very, very sluggish from the reigning champs.
You said it best with Miami just dominated the trenches. I think that was the difference maker in this game, just like it was for them against A&M. They got 5 sacks on Sayan. That is a lot. And offensively, they just controlled the clock. They played a controlled, managing style of football that just never allowed Ohio State to get in rhythm and really get out of a slump that they obviously were in coming off of a bye. And we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but, another team with a bye loses. And just to give a shout out, Jeremiah Smith, he did have a great game, 7 catches, 157, a touchdown. He put it all out there. Ohio State almost crept back into it, but it felt out of reach after that pick 6 for certain.
It did not look good for them, but yeah, Jeremiah Smith, again, having a phenomenal game. The dude is a world-class talent and could easily go to the NFL right now if he was allowed to, but he's not. He's a true sophomore, and that just goes to show a lot of what he's done already as a true sophomore. But also got to give a shout-out to Akeem Mesidor for Miami, the other D lineman that helped Ruben Bain. Number 4 and number 3 were in the backfield the entire game for Miami. They were absolutely feasting on Julian Sand and the running game for Ohio State. It looked like they just could walk through the O-line and get to them. It was just absurd how often you would look up and see number 4 and number 3 in the backfield celebrating because they took down Julian Sand like that. I mean, it was absurd, but those two were just absolute game wreckers and made, life as hard as possible for Ohio State. And I think that's going to be something that's just going to, that's what you need in the playoffs. And we've seen it where we saw it in the A&M game. We saw it in now this game against Ohio State, against arguably the best, team and best roster in the country with, all the players that Ohio State has, and they ragdolled them. So I'm looking forward to, what Miami can do in the semifinal but got to give hats off to them for going in there, getting it done early and setting themselves up for success, and they didn't have to chase the game like Ohio State did.
Especially in a game where they weren't getting a whole lot of credit and a lot of belief in their ability to win that game. So the U is back in the Final Four here, or should I say for the first time. They avenged the 2002 loss to Ohio State in a great fashion. And another game that, people really thought was going to be probably the best game of the weekend. I was on record saying I thought this would be the best game of the weekend, and I was wrong. But, yeah, Oregon just dominates Texas Tech in the Orange Bowl to a sound of 23-0, shutting them out. Making Texas Tech the second team in college football history to not even score a single point, joining Michigan State from 2015. And it was a really disappointing way to go out for Texas Tech after a stellar season.
It was surprising. It was just very surprising that, Oregon, we all knew that they were an extremely, well-sounded team. Their offense was always going to be explosive. They've always been like that. They will always be like that. We thought it was going to come down to a battle of the defenses, and Oregon's looked dominant from start to finish. I mean, they were just dominating almost any aspect of Texas Tech on the ball, and Texas Tech could not get into any sort of rhythm. And then when it felt like they were getting into a rhythm, turnovers. That absolutely killed Texas Tech in this game. You can never. It's almost impossible to win a game, when you're losing on that turnover differential, but it is possible, but at the same time, not likely at all. I mean, to have your quarterback throw 2 picks, then they had fumbles as well. Not ideal. It's just you're always setting yourself up for failure at that point, and obviously it's never intentional. But you got to realize the stakes of the game, what's going on, and try to tighten up here a little bit. I mean, it happened early in the game, and you would expect it to be fixed, and it felt like it never went away for Texas Tech. They could just not establish any sort of rhythm or get going on offense at all. And that was very shocking to me, where we thought that Texas Tech's defense would be the ones to get them over the hump. And, they didn't look that bad, the defense. They were, they held Oregon to a pretty decent amount where
they played well, in my opinion. They just spent too much time out on the field. I mean, 38 minutes of time of possession for Oregon. You cannot ask your defense to spend that much time out on the field, and you give up 4 turnovers. They're lucky this game didn't get more out of hand, and it was only 23-0. Their defense actually kept them in this game until midway through the fourth quarter.
Yeah, Oregon only scored 2 touchdowns, and they had quite a good amount of trips to the red zone. So the defense was holding when they needed to hold. It's just that offense was not playing that complementary football that you absolutely need in the playoffs, and it just did not look good for them from the start almost, where it was kind of back and forth a little bit, both punting, and then once Oregon just started getting on the boards, and then they finally scored a touchdown in the third quarter, it was just like, well, I feel like we're at a point here where it's not going to be going well for Texas Tech, and maybe we're going to get some sort of garbage time, but they couldn't even get that. So the writing was on the wall for Texas Tech. It felt like where this was just not going to be it for them, and like you said, very disappointing for them after having such a phenomenal season where they were beating every team by 20 plus, and this time they got beat by 20 plus.
It's just another team with a bye that loses here, and JMU looked better offensively against Oregon than Tech did. Actually, I love to say it. I was going to say I hate to say it, but no, I love to say that. Feels good. But Oregon will need to play a complete game on both sides of the ball. So far, we've seen one side of the ball play well in each of their games. They're going to need both to play well to beat Indiana, who absolutely dismantled Alabama 38-3 in the Rose Bowl, like we mentioned earlier. Just an absolute belt-to-ass kind of showing. Never felt in reach for Alabama. They felt like a team who had just relegated themselves to being happy to be there.
It was ugly from start to finish. It felt like Alabama was never in it, honestly. Watching it, it felt like that Indiana just took it and ran, and it got out of hand very, very quickly. And again, the same thing with Alabama. They got nothing going on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, absolutely nothing when your starting quarterback is going 12 for 16 with 67 yards. Not great. Not stuff you want to see. And then, of course, we all know that their running game was absolute garbage the entire season. And yet again, only 23 total yards rushing on 17 attempts, with the most coming from their quarterback, Ty Simpson, and most of them were obviously scrambles. So not ideal, never going to win you games. And, you see it on the opposite side with Indiana, where their team rushing, they had 215 yards. They almost had 2 100-yard rushers. Mendoza playing damn near perfect, 14 for 16, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. That is championship, level football.
Efficiency.
Yeah, that is just everything is clicking for Indiana, and it seems like nothing is going to stop them right now. And I would hate to be Oregon to play this Indiana team, because it feels like an unstoppable object is coming right for you, and you better find a way to stop it, or else you're going to be the next person on the hit list.
When you can win a game 38-3 and your starting quarterback only throws 4 passes in the second half, you have beaten a team soundly. And I thought Indiana would win and that they were a much better team than Alabama, but I did not expect it to be as ugly as it was that night. I know Ty Simpson left early. I hope he is doing okay. but I don't think it would have made any kind of difference. This game, as many would say, was a safety hazard.
It was 100% a safety issue for the Alabama side there, where, the SEC, I mean, it's time to consider, do they get that auto bid anymore? I don't know, because it's not looking good for them.
People are saying.
The people are talking. We'll have to see what happens after these SEC dismantlings. But Indiana is legit. I don't care what anyone says. They are absolutely a force to be reckoned with, and they will be for the coming years. As long as Cignetti is at the helm, you better watch out. They're going to absolutely be dangerous.
100%.
And it seems like almost like I don't want to say it was a passing of the torch there, but more or less stealing it.
Maybe it was.
I think it was more or less stealing the torch and bullying the people who were
beating the crap out of someone.
They were taking their lunch money there, and it was not good for Alabama there. But Indiana is absolutely the real deal. Anyone who says otherwise is just a pure hater at this point, and they obviously have a goal set in mind, and they're doing anything and everything to get to that goal, and it's very obviously a national title. So going to be an absolute banger of a rematch between them and Oregon. But the final game, a rematch from earlier in the season, Ole Miss taking down Georgia in the Sugar Bowl with an all-time classic of a playoff game where, recently we haven't really gotten that many classic games where seems to be sort of one-sided and stuff, doesn't really, but this one was an absolute banger.
I mean, it came down to the wire. I mean, 39-34. It's such a tight game. 30 points in the fourth quarter alone, back and forth till the very end, and just an absolute classic showing of what college football should be about. And for me, it was game of the year until the FCS championship game a couple nights later, because that one stole the show. But this game, what Trinidad Chambliss was able to do in that fourth quarter and just play absolute hero ball. There is certain levels of athletes who are good enough to play at every level and make it. But then there's another tier there where you just have an athlete who at any moment can just take over a game and do things that you did not think were possible. And that was Trinidad Chambliss in that moment. There's not many athletes like that in the sport, and he was one of them that night for sure. Some of the craziest plays. He finished with 362 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just did what needed to be done to get his team the win that night.
And it helps when you have one of the best running backs in the nation in Kawan Lacey. The dude also had a great game, 22 carries, 98 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, you're setting yourself up for success when you can establish that sort of run game with someone like him. Mm-hmm. But just to, again, piggyback of what you said about Trinidad Chambliss, I mean, the plays that he was making, I mean, Sean McDonough couldn't have said it better on the broadcast, which, shout out to him. He had a banger of a game. I'm usually not a fan of his, but he called that game perfectly. Playing backyard football in some of those plays, he's scrambling back. He's almost in his own end zone, and he's scrambling up and down the goal line basically just for a 5-yard dump off to Quan Lacey, and he breaks a tackle to get through to the first down. I mean, it was like, what is going on here? I mean, this was the most entertaining game, I think, like you said, until this FCS title game that just happened. But even then, like, they're neck and neck. I mean, the fourth quarter alone was better than majority of games we'd seen this season alone. It was just fantastic on both sides of the ball, where it was just constant movement, craziness was happening. It felt like we couldn't even take a breath. And next thing you know, the game's over. But even then, the ending of the game took 20 years to happen with that final second. Just... And I know that the rules analyst and the former ref was saying, well, there are rules you have to follow, but it's like, okay,
it was the right thing.
I completely understand it, but we just got like, let's be real here. Like,
if Georgia had pulled that off after the stage coming out twice, after a premature Gatorade bath, oh my God, this game would be talked about like the Cal Sanford band game. This would have been talked about forever of how crazy of an ending it really was. And it was already crazy to begin with. And touching on your point about Lacey, this offense, as much as I think Trinidad Chambliss is one of those special kind of athletes, the offense does truly run through Kawan Lacey. He is what gets that engine going and allows for this whole offense to be as explosive as it is.
Like we've said it multiple times, establishing that run game helps open up that pass game, and we saw it in this game drastically where, Georgia had to worry about Lacey because they know he can break off any sort of run at any given moment. So you have to compensate for that. Do you give up a little bit in the secondary? And yeah, they kind of did because Ole Miss's receiving core had a great game with Harrison Wallace, 9 catches, 156 yards, and a touchdown, his longest being a 44-yard catch. And then Dejon Stribling having 7 catches, 122 yards. That's just absurd. And what's crazy is the drop-off after that is the next highest receiver had 19. So you knew the ball was going to one of those two guys, and they still couldn't stop it.
Yep.
It's just insane.
It's like that.
They just have a huge, you'd say like 3-4-headed monster on offense that any given moment, one of those 4 players in Chambliss, Lacey, and their 2 receivers could just break off a massive play. And you just got to pick your poison. Who do you go for here? Because we know Chambliss can do it through the air, on the ground. You got to worry about Lacey in both the running game and the passing game, which we saw quite a bit of. And then obviously their deep threat receivers. It's just insane and setting up a banger of matchups here in the semifinals. But it's going to be – this is going to go down in history as one of the best playoff games probably. And until something one-ups it, I think it could be the best playoff game in the playoff era.
I think the only question left is, does Ole Miss have enough of this magic that they've found to make it all the way? This whole situation with Lane Kiffin has almost made this a team of destiny. It's, can they make it to the end and keep riding this wave, or will this emotional high of this Georgia game sink them to the bottom now that they will be moving on to face Miami? And this game was another instance of a team getting the first round bye and losing. In the 12-team playoff now, the teams who have received the bye are now 1-7. That break between when they last play a game to when they get a shot after their bye is just way too damn long. It's at least 24 days for most teams, if not more.
It's insane, and I had mentioned it when we were previewing these games. Specifically, I said it for Ohio State, but I think I said it for just about all of them. Where that bye is dangerous. I have always in every sport, no matter what it is, NFL, college, any sport, whatever it is that has byes when it comes to the postseason, I do not like it, especially when you have these one-off games. If it's a series, usually byes they don't affect as much because you get 5-7 games, however much it is, to win. Mm-hmm. But when you come to these one-off games where you have the bye, I think it's so dangerous. And I thought the writing was on the wall when Dan Lanning of Oregon said, we didn't want the 4 seed. We wanted the 5 seed so we could play a game. Because he had firsthand experience in last year's playoff where they had the bye, they play Ohio State, get destroyed, and their season's over. Just like that. They had to wait almost a month just to lose by 30. So, I mean, you get to this point now where that's the issue that's being brought up is, of course, the calendar of, college football as a whole, how things are going, how do we mitigate this? Because, everyone's arguing that the best team should get in, you want these good matchups, but then you get to the second round here and these quote-unquote best teams that earned the bye don't look good at all. And if they do, it's, finally, like you're doing, like even Indiana, like they did win by quite a lot, but they took a drive or two to really get going. And then they finally get going and it's like they didn't stop. But they started off this like a tiny bit sluggish and you could see it. And then once they finally got clicking, everything was going their way. It was like, okay, now they're unstoppable. But then you see a team like Ohio State where they fall behind early and they just never got back into it. And same with Texas Tech where it just seemed like they just were not in the game. And I think that's just a glaring issue now is just these first-round byes are becoming a curse, and I think they still are a curse. And until the calendar changes where they don't have almost a month off between their games, I think it's going to continue.
Yeah, I mean, going 1-7 for teams in with the bye is crazy. Last year, I do want to note, three of those four teams were underdogs in their game, so they weren't expected to win based off of what Vegas was saying. However, I think we can both agree Boise State and Arizona State in their games started off slow, and then those games turned into really good games, and it just felt like they were too sluggish to get over that initial hump that they faced. And now you have another season here where it goes 1-4, and Indiana's the only team that looked remotely dominant. Georgia, they did look good. They just ran into a team like Ole Miss who just has a little bit of magic on their side. But it makes you wonder, this is just too long in between games to have off and not to expect to have some ring rust when you're back there in between the lines. And I think these teams are realizing that, and I think there will be a push to fix this calendar, mainly because these top seeded teams don't want to have that long of a layoff.
It's very hard to have this long of a layoff at any time, but especially around the time where the games happen too, where it's around the holiday season. People are traveling, they go home, they have to come back and stuff. So, you get to that argument of, is the interest really there? Are they all in on it? Obviously your true football players and stuff are going to be all in on it. They're going to want to go out there, play that game and stuff like that. But there's got to be that slight sort of thing in the back of your head, like, damn, I really got to go do this right now. Especially them being at neutral sites where they got to travel all around the nation just to get to this game. So it's definitely something that's going to be addressed, I think, way sooner rather than later. And I think there's an extremely simple fix to it, but we'll see how simple they decide to go, or if they just try to complicate everything and blame the format of the playoffs yet again and just change that again. I don't know. Well, that's another thing we're just going to have to sit and wait and see and decide what the SEC and Big Ten overlords decide, because they're the ones that basically run things. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to watch, and I'll continue to die on the hill of that first round buys are a curse.
Especially when it's just that long of a layoff. But things that cannot be changed because they are set in stone is the semifinals. Are two of the last three games left in this season. Four fresh teams in the college football Final Four. The SEC cartel's absolute worst nightmare. We have Miami taking on Ole Miss in the Fiesta Bowl, Oregon taking on Indiana in the Peach Bowl. Two banger games. Let's kick off with Miami taking on Ole Miss Thursday at 7 p.m.
This, I think, has the writing on the wall to possibly one up the Georgia Ole Miss game, because these teams are hot and on opposite sides of the ball. Miami's defense is playing phenomenal right now. They are dominating in the trenches. They just look like a championship level defense, while Ole Miss's offense is just hot as can be, where they're just scoring. So this will be a phenomenal game to watch here between a very hot defense and a very hot offense. So it's going to come down to a whole lot of things, of course, per usual. There's always the small nitpicky stuff. Who's going to stop who first? Can the defense stop the Ole Miss offense? Can the Miami offense maybe contribute here and, get those big chunk plays? And, is Ole Miss going to kind of look a little, open that they have on defense lately, where, some of the things that are preventable, that's just they're kind of letting fly through the cracks right now, that their offense is kind of putting a Band-Aid over almost. But it's going to be very interesting to see nonetheless, but I am really looking forward to this game.
It's a top 10 defense versus the number 2 offense. It will be a really fun game in my opinion. And it's a game Miami has to keep dominating in the trenches if they want to win, and that's by containing Trinidad and winning that battle of the line of scrimmage. And my advice to them is the same as it was last week. To win this game, they need to win special teams and the turnover battle, and that starts with that defensive line up front, containing Trinidad and forcing him to make bad decisions while he's trying to play hero ball when he needs to.
Get Ruben Bain involved, get his partner involved, and Akeem. If you have number 4 and number 3 in the backfield in Ole Miss, then something is absolutely going wrong, because if those two are in the backfield in Trinidad's face, it's not going to be a great night for them. But look for them to rely on, of course, Kawan Lacey, get him established, kind of put that defensive line on its heels with him running the ball down their throats. He's good on the inside. He's good on the outside. That dude can just run the ball as well as anybody. So if he can get going and kind of sort of establish that sort of I'm the dominant one here and prevent Ruben Bain from getting going and getting hot and just toying with the O-line, then it could come down to a lot of, of that trench of who's going to win the battle there. And, it's going to be two just bulls of players and Ruben Bain and Kawan Lacey meeting in the middle there. I think it's going to be highly entertaining.
It will be the highlight of the game for me. And, as my advice went for Miami, my advice for Ole Miss is to hunt for those explosive plays and make Miami play in that shootout. Because if Ole Miss can get going early, Miami's not going to be able to win a game of catch-up with them, in my opinion. If they can prevent Miami from playing that controlled style football behind Mark Fletcher at running back and just controlling the clock and chewing away at the Ole Miss defense, Ole Miss can really get out there and run with this thing. And like you said, that starts with Kawan Lacey winning that battle up front and really getting that engine going. An unfortunate side of it, though, is Ole Miss is going to be out of some assistant coaches here because they're heading to LSU, which to me is just absolutely pathetic. I cannot believe that they're going to be leaving this team with a chance to win the national title before this dream is accomplished.
It's a shame to see that it's come to this because, these coaches are a part of history right now, and I don't know why they would want to step away from this purely because of a job that's going to be that job's going to be there regardless of they win this game, they lose this game. So it's very weird for me, and almost feels like Mr. Lane kind of pulling some things to get the spotlight away. I know he's publicly kind of on the side of Ole Miss, cheering for them, talking about this sort of stuff, but I'm more than willing to bet that it is eating him alive that they're having this much success without him. That he says he tried to stay and all this other stuff, and I know it was a whole debacle of stuff, but I know for a fact that this is killing him, that this team that he built and he helped with is just continuing without him. So it really shows how much of it was him, sort of thing. You could argue that, but I got to give a shout out to Pete Golding, because when he was announced as the hire, everyone had it as one of the worst hires out of the cycle, and he's basically just throwing the middle finger. He's throwing the middle finger to everyone, saying, "Look at me now." I mean, and another huge thing that we could have talked about earlier in the portal is he's retaining everybody too. I mean, Trinidad's coming back, Kawan's coming back. All of his big name players are coming back. So
they feel the magic there.
They love what they've built there, and the players are buying in. And I think that is a great sign for them. And at this point, it can't help but cheer for Ole Miss that it could keep going, just to almost giant fu to Lane Kiffin sort of thing, because it felt like that was the attention on everything before the playoffs had started, and knowing that they still had playoff games to play. And it's kind of crazy how this is all unfolding, and I think I kind of love it, because like you said, it's building this sort of Cinderella story of they're not supposed to be doing this good because they've lost their coaches and all this other stuff.
It is going to be an all-time classic Fiesta Bowl, in my opinion. And you're talking about how this game's going to unfold. How do you see it unfolding for both of these teams? Who are you taking?
This is probably the hardest game to pick out of the two, in my opinion, because it's just, I think there's so many different factors that could change this game and how it's going to go. I don't really know. My initial thought, I think I'm going to stick with it. I think I'm going to stick with Miami in this one. I think that their defense is going to cause havoc early and make Trinidad sort of overthink and possibly, lead to some mistakes. I think that they can put a cork in Kawan Lacey the tiniest bit. He might still have a good game, but he did fumble in the Georgia game, and I think He has fumbled before. He's had some issues earlier in the season, I know of fumbling. So if they can cause a turnover like that early, kind of get in their heads sort of thing, I think it could go in their favor. And I think that their offense doesn't need to play that sort of hero ball like Ole Miss has. And they'll just get behind, Mark Fletcher yet again. Carson Beck will just have to play easy sort of football. And Malachi Tony's just going to be Malachi Tony and, somehow find a way to gain 20 yards off a 5-yard loss or something. I don't know. But I think Miami is going to have enough on the defensive side to really get it done.
I'm going to ride with the U as well. I'm taking Miami in this one. I think that defensive line for Miami is going to be what wins them this game. I think they're going to be able to control the line of scrimmage and be able to control the clock, and that's what's going to be the deciding factor here. And then also, that's what my mind is telling me, but my heart, as much as I love the Ole Miss Cinderella story, they were 11-1, it's, big brand. I cannot cheer for the SEC team because if they win and then they win the Natty, the narrative is going to be like, wow, look, even a mid-level SEC team without their head coach can win the Natty. And I cannot have that. So I'm riding with the U because I cannot have that come to fruition. I think Miami gets this done in the trenches and wins in a really good game.
No, I agree with you there. I can't imagine the SEC talking heads if Ole Miss were to win the Natty, and it would be the bane of our existence having a team like Ole Miss, not your competitive sort of big name SEC school like Alabama, Georgia, LSU sort of stuff. It would completely change the narrative on the SEC and be like, nope, they're still top dog sort of stuff. So yeah, cannot have that happen. As much as this is a great story for Ole Miss, I think it'd be even better for Miami. So, but moving on to, of course, the next semifinal game, the Peach Bowl, another rematch here. Oregon taking on Indiana on Friday.
This, a rematch of the game earlier in the season. Indiana won it 30-20 at Oregon. It was a really good game if you missed that one. And this is going to be a battle of two top 6 defenses, both allowing less than 100 or 270 yards per game. Indiana less than 10 points per game, Oregon less than 15 points per game. This is going to be a really hard-fought contest where no yard is easy to gain at all. And to do this, I mentioned it earlier, Oregon has to play a complete game against Indiana. They need their offense from the JMU game to show up and the defense from the Texas Tech game to show up, and both of them be able to combine to truly try to contend with this Indiana team, because Indiana looks like a complete team on all 3 phases of the football.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, Oregon needs their most complete game yet to have really any sort of chance here. I mean, if they can get that offense that they had in the first round where it was just bang, bang scores, and then they can get that defense that's causing 4 or 5 turnovers against Texas Tech, then they're going to set themselves up for success. But I think it's going to come down to the arm of Dante Moore and what can he do with the ball in his hands, whether that's, dumping it off, finding that sort of deep shot again, or just, scramble yards, but holding on to the ball. Cannot turn over the ball against this Indiana team. It will absolutely kill you in every sort of facet. So Dante Moore has got to play complete. He's got to play safe. But, you got to take those risks sometimes as well. If you think you got it, then go for it. But don't do something that's going to shoot your team in the foot and shoot yourself in the foot. So it's going to be big for Oregon to really get going on the offensive side of the ball, I think, out of everything. I think their defense we have all seen it has played well for majority of the season, and I think it'll be good enough for them. But I think their offense is going to be the point here. Can they find that explosiveness? But on the Indiana side is just don't change anything. You're playing the best football you've played all year. Everything is clicking. Everything is going right. Your Heisman-winning quarterback is just playing like a Heisman, and your defense is playing like the most sound unit in the country. It just looks like what can go wrong for Indiana at this point, and that's the part that almost worries me is that what can go wrong sort of thing, it turns into, well, how did it all go wrong? Because you've seen it plenty of times where these teams, they have that perfect season, everything is clicking, and then it kind of just falters for some reason at one point, and they can't recover. So that's the only thing I'm slightly worried about. But again, with Signetti at the helm, I find that hard to happen with how he runs his ships over there, and it's gonna be pretty tough for Oregon to get some stuff established, I think.
And it's going to be critical for them to not start slow. They really have to show up on offense from the get-go, or Indiana can make it a long day for them. And from an Indiana perspective, they just need to play their style of football, that calm, collected, targeted style. I think that they're going to have the edge at the wide receiver and quarterback matchup, and that Oregon's going to try to play a lot more zone if they can. However, that's really what Mendoza's just a really good player at picking apart. So Oregon's going to be in a tough spot of they want to go man to make it a little bit tougher for Mendoza, but they're not going to be able to keep up with these Indiana receivers. So it's going to be a double-edged sword no matter which way they go. Having to cover Elijah Surratt is no easy feat, and that whole stable of receivers for Indiana is really good. And they're just a team that does everything so well. Their fundamentals, they're one of the most fundamentally well-coached teams I've ever seen.
It's insane how it seems like nothing phases them on any side of the ball. And, even when something goes wrong, it seems like the next play it's all fixed and ready to go, and it never happens again. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I know for one thing that messed up in the Indiana-Alabama game in the Rose Bowl was something that was out of control, where it was the helmet communication was messing up, where, the coaches weren't getting, I think the coaches up in the booth weren't getting the proper communication. The helmet was fine, but the communication system wasn't working. I was like, it's like they're so good that something else had to go wrong for them that they can't even control. So it's going to be crazy to see how this pans out. But I'm looking at, yet again, Malik Benson. That dude just seems to find the big play at all times. I mean, his season stats, he's only got 41 catches, but it's for 696 yards, 6 touchdowns. So the dude Dante Moore just seems to find him in those huge plays when he needs them. So if Indiana can contain those chunk plays and those big, huge plays, I think it could be a long game for Oregon here. But I think regardless, it's going to be kind of similar to what we saw earlier in the season and the way it was being played, but I think it's going to be a little more sound, and I could see this 100% turning into sort of a defensive battle.
I agree. I think I've said this before, it is so hard to beat a team twice in the same season. And so far, outside of, unfortunately, Ole Miss and Tulane, here in the playoff, the same team has not won based off the original matchup. And this is a game for me where Indiana, I think, is a team I can believe can beat this Oregon team a second time, and that's because of that first game. I think that first game was the spark that gave this Indiana team the confidence where they're like, yeah, we're the best team in the country, and we're going to prove it each and every day. I think they have that swagger that just is hard to overcome as an opponent. When you believe you're the best, it is hard to be beaten. And Indiana right now is kind of walking with that swagger, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's very hard to beat a team that everything is just clicking right. It's almost that sort of team of destiny sort of thing where the writing's on the wall with how everything happened last year in the playoff, where people were saying they should never be invited ever again, and now they're undefeated and looking pretty confidently the favorites out of the remaining teams. So, another topic in this is, is the winner of this game going to possibly be the number one pick in the draft? The number one team in the NFL draft being the Raiders, who obviously need a quarterback, and this is going to come down to probably one of these two quarterbacks that are playing in this game. So we'll have to see about that. I think you can't really go wrong with either of these guys. I think they're both phenomenal quarterbacks, and each their own, and they both play that sort of like, especially Mendoza playing that pro style offense. It's just he's built for success. I think both of them will probably succeed, barring any terrible development like we've been seeing in the NFL recently. But nonetheless,
being drafted by the Raiders.
Being drafted by the
Sometimes that landing spot might kill.
yeah, no one wants to be in the Jets, so we'll have to see on that too. Maybe
Yeah,
they try to find a way to
yeah,
come back for another year or something. I don't know, but with
yeah.
all of
Well,
this,
Dante Moore has the option.
yes,
Mendoza has no
yes,
choice.
yeah. But with all this being said, who are you taking in the Peach Bowl?
Man, this is a really tough one for me because I want Oregon to win it all, so then I can just say JMU lost a national championship, and the result of that game truly doesn't matter. But between Oregon and Indiana, I also love Indiana because they got all my old JMU guys there, and I do want to see them win a natty and be able to say that JMU Bloomington won the natty. This is in my heart a really tough game to pick, but in my head, between Oregon and Indiana, I got to go with Indiana. I think they are the best team in the country right now, and I really don't know if anyone left can truly beat them because Indiana is such a complete team.
I like where your head's at. I'm with you there. I think that Indiana is probably the most complete team from top to bottom, and it's going to be extremely hard to beat them. And I don't know if any team can beat them. But I'm going with the Ducks here. I'm going to take Oregon to quote unquote upset them in the rematch. I'm going to go with the trend here and think that I think the rematch is a little different from the regular season here. I don't know what it is. I don't really have a proper explanation for it. But something tells me I think Oregon's going to get it done. I think they're going to get over the hump of, they're supposed to be this premier team, but they don't have anything to really show for it. I think they're going to get over the hump, get into that national championship, and hopefully compete for it. I'm looking forward. Both of these games are going to be absolute bangers, but something is just screaming inside saying, pick the Ducks, pick the Ducks. So I'm picking the Ducks here. I think they get it done. I think they find a way to sort of kind of put a stop to this Indiana hype train and just say, like, hey, we're still here. We're still a really good team. And, they're going to find a way to get it done in the Peach Bowl. So it's going to be a fantastic game regardless, but give me the Ducks. Give me Dan Lanning on his continued cokehead antics.
I love it. No matter what happens, we are going to have a new national champion that we have not seen in a very long time, Miami being the most recent one. It is great to get some fresh faces, some more parity here in college football, and I think this weekend's games are going to be absolutely amazing. Do not want to miss them. But let us know what surprised you the most from this past weekend's games. What excited you the most? What players had you at the edge of your seat watching these games? Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Dynasty Dummies. And follow our personal Twitter accounts at Hunter_Shaw5 or at CronyTony20. And we'll see you all next week.
See you guys.